Hello and welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how to set up two different types of watermarks within Lightroom so that they can be automatically applied to your image upon export. I'm actually going to use these two images here in the top left corner to demonstrate this technique so you can see how Lightroom will automatically size and place your watermark wherever you've indicated you want it, regardless of the orientation of the image. In addition, I'm going to demonstrate how to set up an export preset so that this repetitive action can take place in an automated format each and every time you go to export from your library. So let's get started. So the first thing to do is go into Lightroom and choose Lightroom, the Lightroom menu at the top left, and then choose Edit Watermarks. Here is the watermark wizard. As you can see, I already have written a text watermark with the copyright symbol and my name. This is about personal preference. A lot of people put dates in their watermarks. That's fine. There's no right or wrong to this. It's about personal preference. I prefer not to. That way I don't have to think about and worry about at the end of any given year what date I had last. So this is actually really easy to create, and essentially all you do is choose watermark style up here in the top right, and it says text. Then you can come in and go into the text options. You can choose your font style, whether you want it to be regular, italic, bold, whatever options actually fall under the font style in your computer will actually show up here as well. You can determine whether to align left or right within this particular box, although that's not where we set the watermark placement. And you can also choose the color of your watermark. If you want to have a drop shadow on your watermark, you can go ahead and select this option, and then you can work with your opacity, your offset, radius, and angle of that drop set. Now it's a little hard to see, so I'm going to go ahead and blow this thing up so you can just see sort of the effect of the watermark. That's without the shadow. This is with the shadow. So once you have sort of created this piece of your watermark, you can then determine its actual effects and how it lands on the image. You can change its opacity on the image. You can tell it its size and whether it to be proportional or always the same. Now I choose proportional because then Lightroom will automatically size the watermark based on the size of the image. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and take this back down to a sort of more reasonable size. And you can still see it here in the bottom left corner. Now for me, I like my watermarks to be anchored in the right bottom corner, so I'm going to go ahead and anchor to the right, which means that for each image that I export, the watermark will always be down here in the bottom right hand corner. Now if you don't want it to be so flush against the edge, you can actually change that with the inset option. So you can see as I move to the right on horizontal, I'm moving left away from the right edge, and if I move to the right on vertical, I'm actually moving upwards away from the bottom edge. So I'd like to find a place, 3, 4, 4, and 3, where I get a little bit up off of the edge of the image. Now if you like to put frames on your image, you could actually anchor this down in that area which will ultimately be framed. Say for instance, if you use a frame in a plugin, so it's on the finished product, you could actually aim your watermark to always land within that white border or whichever color border you choose, as well as making that size show up there. So there's a lot of options here just depending on your sort of style. So that's actually option number 1. And when you're done, you go ahead and you can choose Save as a current setting as a preset. When you do this, you get an option to name it. You would just go ahead and say Create, and then after you hit Create, you would hit Save, and that watermark would now be saved as a watermark preset. But before we go ahead and save, I'm going to go show you another option, because you can also use a graphic. So if you are starting a business or have a business logo that's been created for you, or you're creating one for yourself, you can turn that graphic into a PNG file. Now I want to stress that it needs to be a PNG file, not a JPEG. If you use a JPEG, then the watermark will actually have a background instead of being transparent, such as the one you see here. So you need to save your watermark graphic in a PNG file for it to work in Lightroom. But what you would do is save it in whatever folder that you want, and then choose Graphic. And you will be taken into a browser window, and I have one already selected. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and you will see that it's dropped in. Now again, for just benefit of the tutorial, I'm going to make this really big so you sort of see it. It's a little hard to read on this checkerboard pattern, but that's okay. You'll see it when I've placed it into the image. So here you can see that the text options have disappeared because we're not working with text anymore. We're working with a graphic as shown in the top right, but our watermark effects are still here. So again, I can now change the opacity of this watermark. I can change the size. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this back down to a reasonable size. I can also change the inset for this watermark as well as anchor it. Now, say you wanted your watermark to actually be, say, along the right-hand border. You can rotate your watermark any way you want. So you could actually have your watermark running up the side of your image should you choose. So this is a cool feature. Now that we're done, do the same exact thing as we were going to do before, which is save current settings as a new preset, give it a name, hit create, and then hit save. All right, so I'm not going to go ahead and go through that because I've got a bunch of watermarks already saved. So I don't need to save this one, but that's the general idea. So once you've saved your watermark, now you would set up your export presets. So to do that, you can either come into File, Export, or faster way to get there is just right click on any image and choose Export, and then Export. So this brings up an export wizard. Now here's where you would create your export preset. And it would seem kind of intuitive that you would hit add first and create a new one, but that's actually not how this works. What you first want to do is set up your export options, then hit add and save the new preset. So first thing you would see is that there's an export location. This location can be changed every time you export if you want, but if you have like a standard place that you want the current month's images to go or the current year's images to go, then you can set up this one time and create a single profile for your export. But say for instance you were doing weddings, you could actually come in here, have a global weddings folder, and then within that have your various couples names, and just come in, choose that file, or create a new folder each time for a particular export. So there's all kinds of options, and this just brings up a browse window, traditional browse window, so you can sort of find anything you want or create anything you want each time you come in. The neat thing about export presets, though, is the idea that these are automatic, and you don't actually, if you can set it up so you have to change it very little, then that's just going to be less keystrokes for you down the line. The next option you have is file naming. And I don't tend to rename my files, but a lot of people like to put their name in their files, so you can add and append your name to any given file name as well. So you could do that here. So you don't see that chosen for me. You can also set up how videos are exported. I don't have videos that I'm exporting this time, so I've gone ahead and hid that. The next thing you would do is your file settings. So what kind of file do you want to kick out of here when you're done? In this case, because I'm exporting for the web, I'm going to choose JPEG. I put my color space into sRGB because that's the best color space for web viewing. For my preference, I actually want the quality of my image to be 100%. And I don't limit my file size here because I actually image size in the next options below. Here I choose to resize, and I resize on the long edge. And I allow 1250 pixels on the longest edge. That's my preference. Some people you'll see go from 500 to 1000 to 1200 to 1500. It really is a personal preference and whatever you're comfortable with. If you do not want your images to be enlarged, you can choose don't enlarge as well. The next thing you can do is also choose your resolution. Now for web viewing, there's many schools of thought. Everybody says use 72, but then if you read enough articles, those articles say that the DPI here doesn't actually matter. So I put 240. I actually don't change it. I think this was a default because once I've resized it, it becomes useless based on size. The next thing you have an option is whether you want to do output sharpening. So you can choose what your output sharpening is for, and Lightroom comes with 3 options. Are you sharpening for screen viewing? Are you sharpening for matte paper? Or are you sharpening for glossy paper? Because I'm actually this is a preset for online viewing, I go ahead and sharpen for screen. You have 3 choices, whether that's low sharpening, standard sharpening, or high, and I just have chosen standard. Now, in my prior tutorial, I talked about metadata. Metadata is that data that's already embedded in the file. So it could be camera information coming directly from the camera when you took the image. So what was your f-stop? What's your shutter speed? Did the flash trigger? So those kind of things are also built into metadata, but it can also include your name, your copyright, your website, your phone number, and your just personal data should somebody want to contact you. So I actually always include all metadata, but Lightroom gives you a number of options to choose from for your preferences. Now, if you have a GPS function on your camera and you don't want to share the location of the image, the coordinates of the image, then you can say remove location information. I have this checked because I used to have cameras that did GPS. My current body doesn't, so it doesn't really matter for me, but I leave it checked just because it's just a practice that might be useful in the future that I don't want to have to remember to go back and fix. Um, so that's just a little tidbit if you don't want your GPS coordinates to be shown. Your next option is the watermark. And so this goes to what we just demonstrated a few minutes ago about setting up your watermark. In here, all the watermarks I've created over time are available. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the last one, which I just created, which is the mountain logo. So this is the graphic logo. Now, once you're done setting up your preferences, now you're going to hit add. Now I already have this logo created, so excuse me, this export set created, so I'm not going to save it again, but should you want to, you would hit add, name the preset, you could tell it which folder you want it to be in. In this case, I just have mine under user presets, but you can see that there are other presets that were made by other software products, and then you would just hit create and it would show up here. So because I already have this, I'm going to go ahead and choose it, and then you would choose export. Now, because I don't have any images selected, there's nothing to export at this time. So I'm going to come out, choose my images, and you can either click on each one by hold the shift key, or you can select on one and then do Command Control A for select all. Now, while my images are selected, I'm going to right click again and I'm going to choose export. It's going to bring us back into the wizard. I'm going to check the or choose the export preset that I'm interested in, and now I'm going to say export. And you'll see that in this case it's telling me that the files have already been they already exist. The reason that I'm getting this is because I have actually exported these in the past. So I could either make a choice here about whether or not I want to overwrite the originals that I exported months ago, or I could skip because I didn't want to export duplicates, or I can use or can cancel and rethink the whole thing, or I can use unique names, sort of meaning that they're going to come to the top of the list. And in this particular demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and say use unique names. You'll see in the top left, Lightroom was working up here so that you know that it's done now that the little status bar is gone. We're going to go actually find these images on the computer. All right, so it's going to take a minute because I have my stuff well hidden. All right, so here's our two images that we just exported. And to show you the watermarks, I will open them in this. And there you go. Here are the images, excuse me. And you'll see that my logo's in the bottom right-hand corner, right where I anchored it. Here it is, also showing through on the portrait perspective. So you can also see that I've chosen to a little bit of lighter opacity so that the image shows through the colors behind. Now the reason that this works in a lighter image is because I've also included a drop shadow and a stroke on the white text. So should you have an image that was black and white and maybe infrared and all of the grass at the bottom of the image or at the top of the image, wherever you choose to anchor this, is white, you would still see this logo because of the drop shadow and the stroke lines around the text. So that's just something to think about when you develop your watermark to begin with, that having that shadow, as I demonstrated within the watermark tool, really helps offset so that you can have one watermark that you use each time. But clearly you could develop a different export and a different watermark for light images or dark images. The only problem that I see with that is that if you come into a set of images, for instance, if this was 15 or 20, and there was all kinds of different images from the Smoky Mountains, some light, some dark, I would have to selectively choose which ones to export so that I could choose the right preset for it. It's much easier to create one watermark that can be used universally on any image so that, it just speeds up the process for you. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope you have a good understanding of how you can get creative with these things. Go out, create a logo, and then start putting them on all of your images. Take care, and thanks for watching.